How do you explain to your husband that his best friend has always been too comfortable around you and that it never meant anything, and that the look on his face at the party was just insecurity talking? I thought one party, one loud laugh, one ordinary summer evening would dissolve in the garden air like all the other evenings that turned out to mean nothing. But Gareth's face told a different story than the one I had been telling myself. My name is Vashti Crane. I'm 31 years old, a marketing coordinator at Meridian Lifestyle brand, and the kind of woman who has always known how to read a room. I've been married to Gareth for 4 years. We have a son, Finn, who just turned 4. When I tell people about myself, I describe someone confident, socially present, someone who understands how to make a gathering feel like her territory. I never describe the other part, the part where I have been developing something with Declan Morrow that I have convinced myself is nothing at all. The Saturday afternoon at the neighbourhood pool club was supposed to be ordinary. Ren and I were on sun loungers at the far end of the terrace, our water glasses sweating on the plastic table between us, the chlorine and cut grass smell mixing in that specific way that belongs to late August. I was telling her about a project brief at work when I felt Declan lean in from 2 loungers over, and suddenly we were sharing a conversation that had already developed its own shorthand. He was already there when I arrived, his shirt rolled to the elbow, a scratched silver cufflink catching the afternoon light on his wrist, the kind of small imperfection I noticed without admitting I noticed it. Gareth came later from a site meeting, his work shirt unbuttoned at the collar, and filled his water bottle at the fountain 6 feet away. I didn't see him at first, but when he walked over and set his bag down, something shifted. He said hello to the group, and the warmth in my voice changed just slightly, the way it always does when you realize someone is watching something you didn't know was being watched. Later, when he asked about the way Declan touched my arm, not a grab, just a tap, just the kind of contact that happens between people who have agreed their bodies are accessible to each other, I called it the insecurity speech before he finished. I told him he was reading things into a Saturday afternoon that weren't there, that if he was stressed about work, that was something we could talk about, but not like this. I pivoted away from his questions so smoothly that even I almost believed there was nothing to pivot from. That night, standing at the upstairs landing while Finn slept, I noticed something on the wall calendar that Gareth had circled. Rowe and Partners, he'd written. 9 a.m. Bring home file. I had seen the notation before and read it as contractor work, repair estimates, something professional and forgettable. Tonight, after a conversation that didn't go where he wanted it to, the words looked different. I didn't look them up. I told myself I would ask about it tomorrow. I didn't. The rideshare account detail came from Preet at the office on a Tuesday morning. She mentioned, as if filling empty air between emails, that she'd seen a pickup outside the co-working cafe on Albion Lane on Monday around 2:30. Her tone was casual, almost accidental. I said yes, the meeting moved at the last minute, and returned to my screen without explaining which direction it moved. The truth was that I had been taking rideshares to Albion Lane on 6 separate afternoons across June through November, each route logged on the shared household account that Gareth paid for, each timestamp showing a destination that did not match any agency meeting or any location I had mentioned to him. I met Declan there. He brought design work, something about a consumer brand positioning, and I helped him think through the messaging. These sessions lasted 90 minutes, sometimes 2 hours, and they ended with a walk to the corner before we separated. He carried a rose gold lighter that he set on the table beside his laptop at the start of every meeting, a small repetitive habit that I had stopped noticing, which meant I had started cataloguing it very carefully. The rideshare account did not include comments. The timestamps did not lie. Gareth brought it up one evening on the riverside walking path, while Edmund had Finn for the afternoon. The path was wide enough for 2 people to walk abreast, the water visible through a gap in the embankment planting, the light moving between gold and grey the way September light does. He said he'd checked the rideshare account registered in his name, the one that showed all our household trips. Monday at 2:17, a route to Albion Lane, not in the direction of the agency, not to any address I'd mentioned. His voice stayed level the entire time. He held his phone but didn't show the screen. He asked what was on Albion Lane at that time and whether I could name one other person from the agency who attended the relocated meeting. He asked this the way an engineer might ask a question about a structure that wasn't settling correctly. Curious, precise, not yet afraid. I called it surveillance. I said that monitoring my movements through a shared account was not trust, it was control. And if he didn't believe my judgment about where my professional meetings took place, then we had a different problem than geography. I walked ahead of him on the path and picked up my pace the way you do when you're closing a conversation through the simple fact of your body moving faster. He didn't chase my speed. He said one practical thing. If I changed my location during a workday, a single text message would help because we shared a child pickup arrangement, and he needed to know my approximate location if something happened to Finn. He framed it entirely as logistics. He said nothing about Declan. He offered this once. I told him that monitoring my daily movements for Finn's sake was the most passive-aggressive way of calling me a liar that I'd heard all year. By the time we got home, I'd moved the conversation to something else entirely through nothing but body language and the placement of my attention elsewhere. That week, I noticed changes. Gareth started closing the study door when he was on calls. He collected the mail alone and sorted it at the hallway table with his back to the kitchen doorway. He went to bed 40 minutes earlier than usual, not from tiredness, the reading light stayed on, but from preference, from a need to be somewhere other than where I was. On Friday afternoon, I posted an Instagram story from my desk at Meridian. A flat lay of my workspace, a coffee, a mood board print I was proud of. It received 42 likes within an hour. Several were from Declan. I refreshed the view counter twice. The likes told me the narrative was still intact. That Saturday morning, getting Finn ready for breakfast, he mentioned that Daddy had been talking to himself in the car on the way to swimming. Daddy said make sure it matches, Finn reported, and then stopped when Finn woke up. I laughed and said Daddy was probably thinking about work, and the morning continued. The phrase stayed in the kitchen air after Finn left for the living room, and I didn't ask Gareth what it meant. Theo and Bex's garden party in early October was the kind of gathering where you can feel the season changing in the air. String lights looped between 3 wooden poles over the garden, casting warm light over a folding table and a photo booth set up along the back fence with a Polaroid camera and a basket already holding 8 or 10 completed strips. Gareth's father Edmund was there as Theo's longtime neighbour. Wren stood in the quiet corner near the French doors. 8 adults in total, 2 children running between legs. Gareth was at the grill helping Theo when I arrived. Declan arrived 12 minutes after us and moved directly to me with the ease of someone who always finds the same place in a room. In the 2 hours before the photo booth moment, the dynamic between us reached a specific register that the whole group could feel. We completed each other's sentences. He borrowed my phone charger and didn't return it within the normal window of borrowing things. At one point, his hands moved to adjust the collar of my jacket, the same gesture from the pool, the same expectation of my stillness, the same confidence that the contact was normal. Edmund stood 6 feet away with a full glass of wine, watching. I saw him notice. I saw Gareth notice. I didn't stop it. At 9:15, someone suggested a group photo at the booth. 6 of us crowded around the backdrop. Declan stepped behind me as we arranged ourselves. He said something low enough that only I could hear, and my laugh started before his sentence ended. The camera was ready when he brought his right hand around in one firm, flat motion and tapped me on the lower back. Not a push, not a stumble, just the contact of a hand that knew my body and was demonstrating that knowledge with confidence. Everyone erupted. I laughed with my whole body, eyes closed, weight forward. Someone shouted something about the next shot. The Polaroid came out of the camera. Gareth was standing at the left edge of the garden, behind the circle, in the position of someone who wasn't invited into the frame. Edmund set his glass down on the garden table without finishing it. 10 minutes later, Gareth found me by the French doors and steered me toward the side gate, with the quiet efficiency of someone who had planned this moment in advance. The gravel path between the garden fence and the house felt private enough until he started talking. He referenced the photo booth, the positioning of Declan's hand, the composition of the group, and the fact that Edmund had set down his wine glass before it was empty. He asked me to describe what I would have felt if I'd been standing where he was standing, watching the same contact happen between him and a woman he'd known for 11 years. He wanted a specific answer, not a principle. His voice didn't rise. He asked this like he genuinely wanted to understand. I said, and I said this loud enough for people near the pergola to hear, that he'd pulled me away from a party because Declan made everyone laugh and Gareth was standing in the wrong part of the garden. I told him he'd never shared a home with a man who needed emotional recovery time after a Polaroid photograph. I called it embarrassing. I returned to the group and resumed the party laugh register as if the previous 4 minutes hadn't occurred. Wren was near the French doors. She'd heard the side gate exchange. She walked to the photo booth basket, took out her phone, and photographed the Polaroid strip without explaining why. The image showed Declan's arm extended, my body weight forward, Gareth at the far left edge, Edmund's dark outline visible at the garden table periphery. She saved the photograph and pocketed her phone and joined the group again as if nothing had happened. At 11:15, riding home in the rideshare, I posted an Instagram story. The warm garden light, the group mid-laugh. I captioned it, "My People." I refreshed the views 3 times before we got home. Edmund's house on Sunday afternoon held a formality that I'd never questioned before. The dining room had 6 chairs around a rectangular table, a white cloth, a glass-fronted cabinet with family photographs. Finn was in a booster seat between Gareth and me. Nola was already seated across from me with a deliberate stillness that suggested she'd decided on a posture for the afternoon. The meal started with ordinary Sunday routine, passing dishes, Finn requesting more bread, and continued that way until Edmund cleared his own plate, placed his knife and fork parallel, and said he had one thing he wanted to say before the afternoon moved forward. He addressed Gareth, not me. He said he'd stood in Theo's garden for 4 hours and watched his son become a man positioned at the edge of someone else's picture. He said he wasn't interested in naming every detail or running a tribunal, but he wanted to be clear. A husband who watches another man place his hand on his wife's lower back in front of 8 people at a social gathering, and who then gets taken to a side path and told that his discomfort is embarrassing, is a husband whose household has a weight on it that he shouldn't be asked to pretend is normal. He asked Gareth directly what he needed, and whether he'd spoken to anyone who could help him think this through clearly. Nola said without ceremony that she'd observed the dynamic between me and Declan at 3 separate social events before the garden party. She'd stayed quiet because Gareth asked her to. She was not staying quiet after the garden party because what happened there was not ambiguous. She'd set something down at the same moment Edmund had, and they'd never discussed it. She was not trying to make an enemy, she said. She was trying to tell the truth in a room where the truth had been delayed. I let the pause land. Then I said I felt blindsided, that I'd had no idea this dinner would be a chance for the family to deliver a collective verdict on my character, and that the experience of hearing myself described this way was genuinely painful. My eyes filled. This was real, I was wrong-footed, and I said I'd been trying to reach Gareth for 2 months. I said he went quiet, he tracked my movements, he took private meetings I didn't know about, and then his family held a dinner to confirm that I was the problem. I said I'd been managing this alone. My voice was measured and pained. It was a good performance. Edmund looked at me without softening. He said he'd heard what I said at the side gate to his son. The woman he'd heard at the side gate was not reaching her husband. She was closing a conversation she didn't want to have. He said this the way a man says something he'd been accurate about for a long time. After that Sunday, Gareth's behaviour changed in ways I could see but couldn't quite explain. He picked up the car for a service on his own, and when I called him, he answered from the plastic chairs of the dealership waiting room, his voice in the register of a professional appointment rather than personal sulking. He moved a box of personal files from the study cupboard to his car trunk with 2 trips up the stairs and didn't explain where the box was going. The following morning he took Finn to the park before daycare. He did this alone, 2 mornings in a row. I watched from the kitchen window as he pushed the swing and watched Finn's feet go up. I read his park routine as coldness. He didn't look up at the window. He didn't acknowledge that I was watching. When I called my mother that Tuesday evening, I gave her the full account. Controlling husband, hostile family, the side gate debrief framed as him pulling me away from my own social life to deliver a lecture. I said I'd tried everything. I said Declan was just a friend and had always been. My mother listened for longer than usual, then said she'd spoken with Gareth on Thursday, 2 days ago, and she had to be honest. She wasn't taking sides, but she was quiet about this one. The call ended with warmth that cost her something. That Friday night, I opened the shared family calendar on my phone to check Finn's next week. A new entry was already there. Pembury Street, 11:30 a.m., Thursday, bring ID, and home file. It had been added on Tuesday. I'd been looking at this calendar every day since Tuesday and hadn't seen it until now, which meant I'd been avoiding the calendar in the specific way people avoid information they don't want to register consciously. Pembury Street is in the legal district. I know this because I've walked down it to get to a client presentation. I didn't tell myself it was a contractor this time. Wren's apartment on Tuesday evening held the quiet of someone managing something carefully. She'd made herbal tea before I arrived, and she was holding the mug with both hands when I sat down on the couch. I gave her the refined account. Gareth pulling away, the hostile family tribunal, myself as the wife who'd been reaching and finding only distance. I said I was willing to create distance from Declan because I understood how the optics looked. I said I was willing to go to counselling. I was offering olive branches in every direction. Wren asked whether I'd thought about what happened at the pool in August and whether the dynamic between Declan and me had changed between August and October, or whether it had been building longer. I said it had always been like that, it was just our energy. She set her mug down and showed me something on her phone. The Polaroid strip from the garden party. Declan's arm extended, my body weight forward, Gareth at the left edge watching, Edmund's outline at the table periphery. She said she'd taken it from the basket without planning to keep it. She said she was worried, not about the marriage, which wasn't her business, but about whether I was being honest with myself about what the photograph showed. In the rideshare home, I mapped the territory. Gareth had been to Rowe and Partners. He'd been to Glenford Avenue. He'd been to Pembury Street with an ID and home file. Wren had the Polaroid. The rideshare account had 6 time-stamped routes I couldn't explain without naming Albion Lane. I decided on a strategy. I would approach Gareth with a controlled partial truth. I would acknowledge that the dynamic with Declan drifted beyond appropriate, that I saw how the garden party looked, that I wanted to create distance and attend counselling together. I would not mention Albion Lane. I practiced the tone in the rideshare. I had it right by the time the car reached our street. At the kitchen table that same evening, I presented it carefully. I said I'd done some thinking and I wanted to be honest. The friendship with Declan had become something I didn't manage well, and I understood how it looked at the party, and I should have listened to Gareth earlier rather than defending it. I said I was willing to stop seeing Declan socially. I was willing to attend couples counselling, to start as soon as he wanted to book it. My voice was measured and vulnerable in exactly the right proportions. Gareth listened without interrupting. He waited until I finished before he spoke. He said he heard the offer. He wanted to be direct in return. He said the offer addressed the party, one visible event, but not the pattern beneath it. And the pattern included 6 rideshare routes on the shared account between June and November that didn't match any stated location. A communication shift across those same months that he'd raised calmly, and been shut down each time, and a dynamic he'd been raising since August that I'd responded to with personal attacks rather than factual answers. He said the offer I'd made tonight was a partial truth offered as a complete one, and partial truth had a time cost. He asked me to name one conversation across the past 3 months in which I'd answered his question directly. Not a deflection, not a counter-accusation, but a specific factual answer. He said he wasn't asking to win a point. He was asking because the answer to that question was the answer to whether the offer I'd just made was the beginning of honesty or another form of the same management. I couldn't answer without naming Albion Lane. The silence lasted long enough to be its own answer. I told him he'd turned a marriage into an investigation, and that the way he'd described my offer was the language of a man who'd already decided and was performing the conversation for the record. I raised my voice for the first time in this segment, not in anger, but in desperation, as my plan failed. He said one thing clearly. He would handle the rest of this situation in the way that was right for their family. Finn would always be his first concern. He would be in touch through the appropriate channel. He said this calmly, picked up his phone from the table and went to the study. The next morning, I passed the study door on my way back to the bedroom and saw him at the desk in the low lamplight. In his hand was Finn's daycare emergency contact card, the laminated card from the welcome pack with both our mobile numbers printed in the centre. He was looking at the authorised pickup section on the back. He took a pen and wrote one line. He set the card down, closed the folder, and looked up through the door gap and said good morning in the steady voice of someone who slept better than I did. I went to get water and came back to bed. The laminated card was on the corner of the desk. I didn't go in to read the new name. I was afraid of what reading it would mean I knew. Thursday afternoon, I was in the Meridian lobby between a client meeting and a brand review, standing near the reception desk in the specific way of someone who had 15 minutes and a phone. I opened a group chat that didn't include Gareth. I typed a message describing the past 3 months from my perspective. A husband who monitors rideshare routes, a family that had convened a Sunday dinner to review my character, a wife who'd tried to reach her husband with genuine offers and been met with procedural language. I asked whether anyone in the chat thought this level of monitoring and withdrawal was healthy behaviour in a marriage. I sent it at 14:22 from my phone connected to the Meridian Company Wi-Fi, my employee account logged in. The chat included 6 mutual friends, Ren, my 2 Meridian colleagues including Preet, and Declan. Declan read it within 4 minutes and replied. Preet, upstairs at her desk, read it at 14:28 and didn't reply. Ren read it, took a screenshot at 14:36 and didn't reply. The timestamp, the device, the Wi-Fi network, and the recipient list were all now part of a record. Friday morning at the Pelham Street chemist, I was in the queue when Brid Faherty turned around and registered me. She gave a short hello with no warmth in it and turned forward again. The fluorescent light flickered twice in 2 seconds. I stood in the queue and told myself she was distracted. When I came out, Brid was crossing to the opposite pavement without looking back. The morning light showed everything at the same temperature. That Friday evening, Gareth came home from work. At the bottom of the stairs, in a position that wasn't the usual place for documents, sat a thin binder labelled in his engineering handwriting. Utilities, Crane. It was too thick for utility bills. It had the weight of a document set with dividers. I set it back. He called hello from the kitchen and asked if I wanted tea. His voice was completely ordinary. I stood at the bottom of the stair and looked at the binder and didn't pick it up again. The Meridian Foundation's annual literacy charity gala was on a Saturday night in mid-November. The event hall was a civic building conversion with high white walls and a foyer floor of checkered black and white marble tiles, the kind of floor that carried sound from one end to the other. I arrived in the emerald green dress I'd bought for professional events, the one that had always felt like the right kind of armour. I gave my name at the check-in desk and received a table card. Table 9. Table 9 held Meridian corporate guests. Ren was seated 2 chairs to my right, both of us attending as Meridian representatives. This was known in advance, and I'd registered it without concern. To my left was a woman I didn't recognize, mid-40s, dark suit, a small leather document wallet placed neatly beside her place setting. At 8:12 p.m., 15 minutes after the reception began, a man I didn't recognize approached table 9. He asked for me by my full legal name and surname. I confirmed. He placed a sealed envelope and a document packet beside my water glass. He stated in a voice audible to Ren and the woman beside me that I had been served with a separation agreement and a motion for temporary exclusive possession of the marital home and vehicle with a formal response deadline of 14 days from tonight. He noted that a temporary custody schedule for Finn was attached and that a hearing date was confirmed in the document. He stepped back and left through the service corridor. I opened the packet. Page 4 was an evidence schedule. It named 6 rideshare records on the Crane shared account, time-stamped, showing routes to Albion Lane. It named the Polaroid strip photograph, reproduced in colour, accompanied by a signed written statement from Ren Adair. It named the group chat message sent from my Meridian device on Thursday, screenshot with timestamp, full recipient list, Declan's 2-word reply. It named a log of 8 dialogue attempts made by Gareth between August and November, each dated, each noting the specific question asked and the category of response given. It named a written statement from Edmund Crane describing the garden party interaction from his position in the garden. Ren put one hand up, flat, the way a person stops a car at a crossing. She said she'd given a statement because she was asked to tell the truth and she didn't know how to do anything else. She said she was sorry, but she wasn't going to say something different tonight. The woman to my left collected her document wallet from the table, stood without comment, and moved to a different seat. I sat at table 9 with the checkered marble floor beneath my chair and the room carrying on around me, and something became clear that had the quality of a door opening onto a room I didn't know was behind the wall. The confidence I had performed, at the pool, at the party, at the side gate, in the group chat Thursday, had felt, in each moment, like power. I believed that a crowd's laughter confirmed I was right. I believed that a man who asked questions calmly and accepted my non-answers was weaker than my refusal. I believed that control of the social narrative was the same as control of the facts. What I understood now was that the crowd's laughter had been observed by a man who didn't need applause to take a measurement. The garden side gate exchange had been logged. The group chat had been screenshotted from a company device. The Polaroid had been photographed by a woman I considered my own ally. What I thought was confidence had been deposited, one dated entry at a time, into an archive that didn't require my signature to be accurate. The motion for temporary exclusive possession was granted on the 6th day of the response window. I moved to my parents' house with 2 rolling bags and a carry-on I overpacked with things I wouldn't need in a spare room. The hearing date came. The temporary custody arrangement, Finn with Gareth on weekday mornings and alternate weekends, became the working framework. Preet handled the client meetings during the 2 weeks I worked remotely, and the handoff was professional and complete. The inner team group chat had reduced its active members by 1 name, which was mine. I discovered this because I noticed the silence rather than being told. Declan sent no message after the night of the gala. On the 11th day, I stopped checking the thread. Edmund did not contact me. Gareth collected Finn from daycare in a navy coat, practical and functional, the kind of coat a man buys when he's equipping himself for the next version of his routine.